Hey everybody, welcome back to Tavern Talks for episode 133. Tonight we've got Robert Anzelde, I hope I pronounced that right, and uh, we're going to be talking about some unique things in the TTRPG space, specifically around language. You know, language is such a big deal. The way you speak, how you portray certain things can give you a different idea on perspective or motive or even how things look and feel in a world like fantasy. But what happens when we go a little farther and actually are looking into like how language is built, things like that, like the Elven language or Klingon or other these strange languages that don't really have a reason to be there? We're gonna find out all that hopefully tonight. Um, but yeah, Robert, if you want to kind of give us a breakdown of
Yeah,
like who you are and what you've been doing in the
sure,
TTRPG space, like how long you've been doing it, those types of things.
sure. And first, thank you very much for the invitation here. Great platform to have amazing conversations. Have a topic, some topics, and just talk and a chat in a tavern. Like this is perfect.
Thank you.
Really glad to be here. So obviously I'm here for a reason. I'm a professor of cultural linguistics. Have different specializations like integrating critical thinking into the curriculum. But for the most part, as far as my language background and then my gaming background, professor of education, specialized cultural linguistics, helped create the Illinois State Board of Education ESL bilingual program at two different points, undergraduate degree in linguistics education, master's education, PhD, curriculum instructions, specializing in linguistics focus, created an adult TESOL, ESL program, taught ESL to children and adults for decades, about 3 decades, 30 decades, 30 years,
Impressive.
lived in
Woo!
Japan for 4 years. Lived in Japan for 4 years, studied Japanese there at a language institute. I was one of three Americans at the time studying with the last surviving authentic ninja grandmaster. That's another story. I have a heavy martial arts background, so I got involved with that and translating in the dojo with Senmon Kotoba, which is specialty jargon. I'm right now married to a South American immigrant. Have a daughter. We homeschooled the last 3 years, or sophomore, junior, senior year of high school. Studied at Oxford during high school in the summer, and now she's at St. Andrews over in Scotland, where um, Prince William met Kate at university.
Yeah.
We focused on literary tools, and that's something we'll talk about later. So we had about 3 to 4 hour lessons in literature each day, and that helped. I remember the interviews over the phone to get her during the interview process. It was amazing. So that's something we'll talk about later too, because that's actually surprisingly important in gaming. I know. I mean, and that's why I'm here, the academic part, to explain it all. Because you'll hear things about people talking like why they play, why they do this, but I'm here to provide that foundational construct to explain the precise tools everything is built on. And everyone here will understand. You don't have to have, PhDs or whatever to understand this,
I do
okay?
not have a PhD.
Yeah, I mean, all of you here probably do have PhD, the equivalent of PhDs or more in something you're doing, like gaming or whatever. So, but you don't actually have to do the reading. That's why I'm here. As far as my gaming, I'm mainly Dungeons and Dragons. I'm very active in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Played at Ernie Gygax's table a few times. I DM'd at the site of the first Gen Cons like Horticultural Hall, Legion Hall, and other the original TSR headquarters, Dungeon and Hobby Shop Museum. I became the last person to hold a game of Dungeons and Dragons publicly. Jeff Leeson is still there weekly doing private games, but they're private, so you have to know someone to get in, of course, or contact him. So, but that was neat that I held that game, and Justin Lanasa was there too, and it was a blast. It was just so much fun. You in the intro, you can see the pictures there. More recently, I was filmed as a player during a game of AD&D at Ernie Gygax's home, and thereafter interviewed for Blake DeRush's upcoming release of his 50 years of fantasy documentary on Dungeons and Dragons. He stopped over and we had like a 2.5 hour conversation. We'd even move out of the space we were in. We were in my
I'm
kitchen
not
about two
shocked.
and a half. Yeah, because Blake, and then we moved into the back room to do and you saw a little blurb on that, to do the 45-minute interview, and it lasted almost 3 hours. I have to say, okay, first of all, Blake is amazing. He was homeschooled by his father, who was an English professor. Very well-read guy. Avid reader, can read a lot in a short period of time. Very well-read. He's amazing, not just his personality and his intellect, and the ability for him to actually learn things so quickly on his own. He's such an independent learner. Um, he is, and I told him, I stopped for a moment. I said, Blake, I think you're probably the most well-connected person in the whole world of Dungeons and Dragons, because you went around interviewing like everybody.
Everyone. He said they're currently. I just got a message from him today. They're currently in D&D in a castle
In
over
England.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
England.
Yeah, that's going to be great when that releases this fall. So
Yeah.
I was going to
Blake
say
was
this semester.
Blake was the one that recommended you coming on the show and talking about language and things
That's
like
right.
that. So
Yeah,
no,
that's right.
and he has been a huge supporter of the Misfits, and we met at GaryCon this year and immediately had this just very easy way of vibing back and forth.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
supposed to see him in a couple weeks. Sadly, I can't take on another convention this year, so I'm not going to
Yeah.
be down
Yeah.
in Conjuration to see the first premiere for the show. But I will be in Philadelphia in January to be there with him and Chris to see it at there. So that'll be the first.
The
time
Philadelphia Gaming Expo.
Yes.
I would have
H2.
to go through. Yeah, who runs that? He texted me a few months ago.
Ron.
Ron.
Yeah, Ron.
Yeah, really nice guy. And I'm not. I say it how it is. Okay, Blake, really great guy. Personalities matter.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, personalities matter. I connected with you, and I'm like, wait a second, I have to be on. I have to be on James' show. Can I get on James' show? Personalities mean everything. Ron's another one. Really great, really smart guy. Yeah, that's a great expo to go to.
Yeah, I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it. We're actually going to be myself and a friend of mine, one of the other guys that works with us with the Misfits, Beaker. Him and I are actually going to be up there, and we're going to be media for them for that weekend. So we're going to be behind the scenes, talking to people, doing
Nice.
interviews, things like this. And I'm really excited because it'll be our first big moment to do it outside of the tavern. When we're on the stream, it's one thing and it's a one-on-one, but to go around and see people in their element, to see people playing their games and talking about this amazing passion that we all have. And it's uniting people, not just online, it's uniting people around the world, it's uniting friends and family and all these things where I don't see it in a lot of other communities. And that's one thing I really have loved about Dungeons and Dragons and the TTRPG community in general. So
yeah, you have to get in field, in stew. INSITU is the Latin, I believe.
okay.
And everybody, those who are listening, I know it's difficult to get out there and like meet people, and it's kind of nerve-wracking at first. Sometimes even I'm a little bit of a recluse, even though I'm in front of students all the time. At the universities, done presentations in front of 1,000 people or whatever. But yeah, I get it. But now's your chance, because the D&D world, even though it's really big and there's some untouchables out there that are difficult to get in touch with, a lot of the people, probably most of the big time hitters are still touchable. You can still talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you were mentioning, like you run into people at conventions, you're like, whoa, that person's like really well known. You can just have a normal conversation with them.
I mean, it's the way that this tavern has grown for many years is a lot of our guests will come from conventions. We'll go out to a convention. We'll just ask them, hey, we've got this show. We're working this idea. Would you be interested? Perfectly good example. We were out in San Diego just a couple weeks ago. I was out there with Heroes of Evermore, who just put on an amazing convention out there called Mysticon. And lo and behold, the night we land, I'm supposed to guest as a professional game master and speaker like this. And then we're walking out of the hotel, and who do I run into but Todd Stashwick? And he's like, hey. I was like, hey, we're going out to dinner with Morgan. He goes, yeah, you must be part of the team. We sat down and talked and found out like his whole background of theater and what he's doing in the space of actual film industry and things like that as a professional actor and celebrity at that point. But yeah, people aren't as untouchable as we believe they are.
Hmm.
And a
Yeah.
lot of times it's just being willing to walk up and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, or hey, I'd like to ask you a couple questions. Um, the way I tell people when they're doing those types of things is don't walk up to somebody that you want to talk to thinking you're not going to be able to, because then it's going to feel
Yeah.
kind of like fanboyish, and they're not. All you're going to get at that point is a handshake, maybe a signed thing that you want signed, and then they're going to expect to walk away. But when you go up with questions, you go up with a interest in who they are and what they're doing in the
Yeah.
world, in the space, they're much more accepting than most people would guess.
Yeah, I mean, empathize, put yourself in their shoes. I mean, they're at a gaming expo.
Yep.
Mention some cool thing about a game. I mean, that be genuine. And
Yep.
it's yeah, I totally agree. It's a great community. I think there's a lot of good coming out of everything that's going on with
Absolutely.
yeah, all the stuff, all the conventions, the podcasts, the shows. It's great.
Yeah.
There's just going to be a benefit. So
Right.
yeah, great to be here. And my perspective, I was going to give here. My approach was,
Sure.
and this is kind of me talking through the lens that's very comprehensive and looking at the foundation of how language and TTRPGs, interact. And I know I'm mainly D&D, but I don't think that's going to matter if I just
I don't really think
reference
so
D&D.
either.
No.
Three questions just to kind of get us to kind of warm things
Yeah.
up on how the interview goes and stuff like that. Three questions I ask all of my guests. One, what where did you start in the TTRPG
Yeah.
world? Like what got you interested and when was that? Because a lot
Wait
of
a second.
times,
Blake asked me the
yeah,
same
listen to
question.
this. Is it
Are you and Blake on the same like?
probably? I
You're
asked him the
sharing
same question
conscious
on the show, and I think he gave me
your
a weird look, like I
consciousness.
was watching his stuff.
Yeah. So yeah, so I started when I was about 12, and my same thing I told Blake. It's amazing. Basically I started when I was about 12, and I was at my friend's house. No, maybe it was 10 or 11 because it was third grade, and my friend Randy's he and I were hanging out, and it was a newly constructed house in the suburbs of Chicago, still some like bricks and plywood around and whatever, but it was unfinished basement. And his older brother came, Ken, and he's like, "You guys come down to the basement. I got something for you guys." And we're like, "Oh yeah, right. He's gonna like pound on us or something." Yeah, not going to the basement with Ken. And then he's like, no, come on, guys, there's a game. And I was like, yeah, what kind of game? No, it's a game. It's like you'll see, it's a role-playing game. I'm like, what? So we went down there, and he had this like makeshift like table with plywood and something over it. And he's like, this is called Dungeons and Dragons. It's like, what's this? And we had green army men
Yeah.
as our PCs, so our minis, red bricks. We was it the chamber? I can't remember which module of AD&D it was. It was AD&D. Um, but
I can
there's
try
like
to
a
kind of
pit.
look it
It's got a
up.
brown front. Slaver Stockade, the green cover. Slaver Stockade, and you had to walk on like the 2x4s above and not fall into the little cells below that had monsters or whatever. So we were doing that, and I'd even realized 2 years later that it was a Slaver Stockade. And so we ended up playing that, and then after playing that a bunch of times, and he was behind like this like partially this like partition. We saw his head. He was
Mhm.
he was rolling for us and everything. We did nothing but tell him what we wanted to do. So it was just like OD&D,
Yeah.
but it was using the AD&D module. And then a few days later, he's like, "Oh, I have or a few sessions later, he's like, I have another game for you." And I'm like, "No, I want to play this other one. I want to play this Dungeons and Dragons again." No. And he's like, "No, I have another one." I was so upset because I was so hooked on D&D. And then he said it's called Gamma World. And I was like, "What? It's the future." And I'm like, "No, I don't want to do that. Forget it." And then we started to play. It's the same general concepts. I mean, in the future, I mean, in D&D, there's also electronics, and there's future technology too here and there. But I started to play Gamma World, and I just fell in love with the idea of, like, getting a booster for your weapon and etc. And you don't have your armor is in the form of like a electromagnetic shield or whatever it was.
Mm.
So I started then, and then off and on I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and then Stranger Things came out, of course. So I'm one of them where I introduced it to my daughter, played one-on-one with Keep on the Borderlands, fought she talked the Mad Hermit. I thought it was going to be an NPC for her, but she ended up fighting it, and then went into the catacombs and fought I forgot what creatures I had for her. And yeah, it kind of started from there, and it just I'm like you. I'm verbal. I like to be friendly, and I just approach people, and the next thing you know, I'm all over, and I'm an hour outside of Lake Geneva, so I'm meeting the Gygaxes, and had an incredible time at Ernie's game. What a great narrator, a DM, an orator. That I learned so much at his game, because he'll go for 10 to 16 hours without stopping, without breaks, and there will be 10 people at his table. And he's got this like voice and this presence, and I'll talk about it later because I don't want to jump ahead and give anything away, but of how language and being a good game master, how it interacts. But we'll talk in detail about that later. But yeah, so now I'm here, and I just love it because I get to integrate my academic passion, which is linguistics and cultural linguistics, anthropologic cultural linguistics, if you want to get real specific.
I've always had a passion for stories like Tolkien, and then I found out that there was actual realizing of like there's a system that goes behind it. And we're preparing our show here in the next couple of months because in 2025 we're actually launching a live play that's going to be based on Tolkien. So it's going to be the One Ring from Free League Publishing.
Oh yeah, right.
We're utilizing their expansion stuff for Moria, and so I'm in knee deep right now just researching old lore of Tolkien because I don't want to touch something that might be known. I want to grab something that's kind of behind the scenes, which I think would be a lot more fun, and it gets those people that have read more than just Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit something to kind of chew on, because we're looking at some very old lore when we're looking at what we're going to dive into when we get Moria. So,
it's the knowledge that gamers have. It's so incredible. Like when I'm
it's pointless knowledge, but
no,
it's wonderful.
No, pointful. You'll see. I mean, we'll touch on language. It's meaningful. But when I speak to gamers like yourself and the others listening, I just talk to you like colleagues, because you're such a wealth. You have such a wealth of knowledge. And it's amazing what I can pull from all of you. And I mean, the equivalent, not to get all academic again, but the equivalent of degrees that all of you have that you don't realize, it's amazing. I mean, I'm waiting for like an RPG degree. There's got to be one out there.
So we found, we were talking about this at MystiCon actually. Todd was looking into it already. You can get a master's in Tolkien lore. And I was like, I might utilize my GI Bill for that because I'm prior military, so I've never used it. So I was like, why not?
Oh, you never used it? There aren't too many. I know, like in Illinois, it's like Northern and then Northeastern Illinois University. There are only 2 that accept it, but yeah, definitely use that. I mean, thank you for your service, by the way. That's yeah, I can't tell you the number of reasons why I'm grateful for there being a military, but I just wanted to thank you for that, because I understand, because I used to martial arts, I used to train military, and yeah, there's a lot of scary stuff going on out there, and
and it's
so
not
anyway,
getting any better out there. So those that are already that are still serving, I wish I was there next to you, but keep and thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
So first we
the
got
second
into,
question. That was first question.
Yeah, first question was how long you started when you were 12, 13. But second question I like to ask is, what caught your eye? What was the point where you went and I went, I'm going to play Dungeons and Dragons, and you went, I need more? Like, what was the catcher for you?
Yeah, the motivating catalyst.
Yes.
It's called the extrinsic to intrinsic motivational construct, undergirding motivational construct. That's the fancy word for it. It's like what made you tick? What caught your attention? Yeah.
Right.
It was, and it's interesting because I have my little notes next to me too on my phone. It's this idea of um in the in the little the little piece that my daughter took while Blake was filming me. That's in the intro. I was talking about that. It's this idea that you give somebody was giving me the freedom to take my background knowledge, whatever that is, and build on it and make choices and give me a lot more choices than I have in this real world here.
Yeah.
Like a lot more. Because we're a prison nation. 25% of the people in the world who are in prison in our country. We have a lot of rules, a lot of laws. We may not realize that, but we do. We can do certain things. We can't do a lot.
Yeah.
You can't have a beer and walk around the block. That those days are gone unless you're in like some places like in the South or certain times in the city or whatever, schmelz season and stuff, whatever.
Right.
But this idea that I was given the ability to use my free will or extend my free will, because free will has limitations. We can only do so much in any world. And if you want to be able to do anything, if you enter a campaign that's open world, but you can literally, there are no constraints, like you can do anything you want, it'll get boring.
It does.
Yeah, there's no challenge, there's no constraints, so you don't have the ability to like intellectually manipulate the environment using your behavior and the barriers in front of you, the natural barriers of the environment as interactive variables. So and that's kind of like human beings, and this is where it comes to the undergirding construct of human beings, why we develop language and culture, which is because in order to have a healthy society, because you saw what happened in World War II in Germany and expanded, right? So that wasn't a healthy society, right? So if you want a healthy society and healthy life, we have to work together to solve problems in a positive manner for the bettering of society. And I know we have different ideologies with this. We can go back and forth, but work together in a positive manner to help one another for the bettering of society. If you take away one of those variables, you'll have, Nazi Germany, you'll have a problem. Right. You can go isolate yourself. I've wanted to run away to Wisconsin and go in a log cabin and isolate myself, but after like 2 weeks, I'll be like, can't wait to get home and play with the, games with the guys. And because we have parts of our brain, I mean, our brain is like a spider web. So think of Gardner's intelligences. We have different parts of our brains doing different things, but they're all sharing information and the synaptic charges that are shooting back and forth. And one of it is for interpersonal intelligence. So we are actually wired as humans to develop language and culture on the basis of solving problems by getting along, working together to solve problems in a positive manner.
And
that's really so. And thank you. And that brings us back to what caught my attention. I was given the ability to do that, but with more freedom that's out that window. Because I miss walking around the block with my dad and he had a beer. He's still alive, but it's like you can't walk around with a beer around in the suburbs of Chicago anymore, especially in this
suburbs. Where I grew up, you could, because I grew up in the
suburbs. Yeah. So you can do. I've lived in the sticks, and I lived in the town and worked in the town next to the town in Ohio where J.D. Vance had lived. And you seen his movie?
I haven't. No.
Hillbilly Elegy. That's real. Like I lived there, one town away. Yeah. So I know it's a different
I'm
environment.
Scared you said that because I grew up in Ohio for 20 years. So like, I don't know.
What part of Ohio?
Northeastern.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was outside of outside of
Youngstown. Okay, you're south.
So I was in I worked in Centerville, and he was one town over.
I know where Centerville's at. Been there, done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I've been through Kentucky. I've been through Hazard County, Dukes of Hazard. I couldn't even get out of the car. My buddy next to me who's from there said they'll beat you. Like you're done. You're not from here. And it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, this country has a lot of different areas. So,
it does,
um,
and it's
but
weird that we say that because it brings into the idea of the Dungeons and Dragons because it's just
yeah.
in a smaller perspective. We take things like, and Blake and I went on a tangent on this after the
Oh,
show
probably for
about
hours.
the idea of Tolkien's representation of races was just a portion of each person's being. And we went like the idea that orcs were not really supposed to be these evil things, but
Yeah.
mankind's way of showing rage
Yeah.
and restraint and things like that. And like
Oh,
elves
yeah.
there was a
Yeah.
reason for elves, and it wasn't just that they were supposed to be pretty, but they were everlasting, and they were supposed to
Yeah.
be that status or the staple
Oh, yeah.
of
Yeah.
the
Now that you have a
world.
professor of linguistics here, just a quick mention, because you're
Sure.
dealing with language. The term race refers to human race. The context means species. So same word, different meaning,
Right.
but it actually means species. It was taken from the phrase human race, which means
Okay.
human species. Yeah,
Nice.
so it's okay to say that. It's like I'm telling you, I'm a linguist. It's okay to
Yeah.
say that. So
Interesting.
yeah, the different races and I mean races, species, you can call it either. It's
Right.
fine. It's all about context. So yeah, he had a purpose. Tolkien had a purpose. I mean Tolkien,
Yeah.
New England, Tolkien. Oh, by the way, the pub where he and C.S. Lewis used to drink, Eagle and Child.
Yeah. I will get there
Uh,
one day.
it,
I will
I
get there.
I drank there, and I had a beer there when I think we were looking at Oxford for my daughter before she went there, and then they closed it down. Now they're reopening it, but it's going to be I think still Eagle and Child again. It's neat. It's like boy, that's another story.
I've never been to Europe for more than 48 hours, and I really want
Oh
to
yeah,
go
I feel bad for
because
you.
um, for somebody who lives in a mindset of ancient worlds and fantasy and seeing all these things, and then growing up knowing that like my heritage is Irish, Scottish, Scandinavian, that level of era.
Yeah,
Like my goal is to get back to Scotland and Ireland and really see what that world looked like, because we had a guy on just last week, one of my good friends, Malcolm, over there, who I was shocked to state that it was when he tells me about walking through the Shetlands of Ireland in the Highlands, it's like you're walking back into time. There is no time has stopped there. That is where they're still sitting. That's the land they still live in, and things like that just blow my mind. And he's a full time writer, and he's like, I can go out there for days and just write
oh yeah,
because that's where they it brings that inspiration to things.
yeah. They're the Scottish and Irish, generally speaking, the common patterns you'll find, and they're like they're socializing and stuff. They're like really nice people.
Oh yeah,
My daughter doesn't want to leave. She loves the Scottish so much. She just tonight she just went on a date with an Irish guy,
there you go.
and just really nice
They
people.
are.
But yeah, I know what you mean. It's like when I was living in Japan. I was I was transported to a different time, and that's one of the reasons why I sent my daughter over there. First of all, the schools are way cheaper. You wouldn't know that, but 700-year-old school beat Oxford in the rankings for like 4 years in a row. Beat Oxford and Cambridge, St. Andrews. But I'm like, I'm gonna work my butt off, and my wife and I, to get her into a university like that so she can go and study in a fairy tale. And
Yeah.
I was in Japan for 4 years, and everybody asks me, what's it like living in Japan? Like you're training in ninjutsu and like you're training with like a real ninja grandmaster. What was that like? And learning Japanese and speaking Japanese. And I said, it was like waking up in a dream, like a fairy tale. And then when I came back here, I realized, whoa, was that real? Did I
Right.
actually go there and do that? And I was there for 4 years.
Yeah,
So
I lived in South Korea for a year for the military, and I felt very similar.
ooh,
Yeah.
1 year is good. If you're gonna go anywhere and live anywhere, it's got to be a solid year because then you start to recognize like aspects of the language and the
Mhm.
culture. But then, not to spoil it, but when you live somewhere to the point where you can read the language and you understand the language, the mystery's gone. So it gets a little boring actually. I mean, it's
Yeah.
cool when you can go sing karaoke and I'm speaking Japanese and translating in the dojos, but it gets boring after a while because
Right.
the mystery's gone. And that's the thing about Dungeons and Dragons and gaming. That mystery, the unknown, and it's safe. You talk about safe space, the phrase
Yeah.
safe space. A safe space is a place where you can like make mistakes and you won't be canceled and criticized. And even if you make a bad mistake and then you learn from it and you move on. Hey, that's
Right.
our games. That's the gaming table right there.
Yeah.
And we can do that and survive and even kill our character and then come back to life. I love that. So that's what I loved about the game. I was able to use my free will. It was a safe space where um I can do things that normally would probably hurt me out here. I can use my creativity. Ultimately, you're using your mind. You're allowed to use your mind. For me, the worst, if you want to torture me, just like stick me in a room without anything, and
Mm.
I'll be okay for a few days until my thoughts start to get repetitive. And because I like to be creative, like you. I mean, you're here because this is you. I mean, James is, you're creative.
Yeah.
You take this away from you, it's like it's hurting yourself.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I realized that um, after my second deployment, where we get the opportunity, and I never thought this was going to happen. This was a dream come true that had kind of launched what is now Tabletop Misfits.
Huh.
We were sitting in the desert, nowhere exciting whatsoever.
This is like
It's
Tolkien. This is like Tolkien, okay,
yeah.
because this is how he started to get the idea of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. So, but go ahead.
But
Sorry.
yeah, no, we were sitting in Al in the UAE, around barriers and around borders and all that stuff, and you're protected by your base. But my buddy and I were sitting there the first day we landed, and I was like, I don't know how we're gonna like connect to anybody. And my buddy's like, I got a bag of dice, and I was like, there's no way we're gonna pull this off. Within 2 weeks, we had 4 nations, 3 different organizations. We had 11 people sitting around the table for 6 months,
Right up there.
playing games, and we ran a
But
Dungeons and Dragons campaign for the entire 6 months.
I
Um,
bet most of it was up here too.
yeah.
Was memorable.
Well, yes and no. It's funny
Huh.
because we were in the MWR and we were kind of playing around looking at ideas because we had Amazon ship us a grid map because it was easy and we could draw on it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but apparently, a year before we had gotten there, somebody had donated an entire box of the Pathfinder like stand-in monsters. It had
Oh, I know
never
what
been
you're talking
used.
about. There are a lot. Oh, you got lucky. That's
So
expensive.
we got there, and I was like, "Can we use that?" And they're like, "Nobody's touched this thing in over a year." And I was like, "We'll use it. We use that thing every Friday night for 6 months." And then at the end of it, they're like, we don't know if anybody else is ever going to use this again. I was like, okay. So I threw it in my box and I took it home.
Yep.
So it's sitting right
Yeah,
here
yeah.
on my rack right now. So, and
That is crazy. I love it.
it was great. But
Well,
yeah, no, that kind of the idea
that's
of
like Tolkien.
taking
Yeah.
all of this, all the people, like we have, like I now have friends from uh, the Danish military. We have friends from the Australian military. The Canadians were there with us. Um, we still talk like to the day because of this game, and that's where the Misfits came from. Was
Yeah.
we were a bunch of people out of our element, and the only way we can unite is through tabletop. And then it became just this running movement, and then it moved to us talking about it about 2 weeks before we left. Of hey, why don't we come home and do this as something unique? Sadly, nobody else helped me with this, so it was just me driving it forward. But it had
I
definitely
get that.
pushed me hard enough
Yeah.
to do it. And then, um, yeah, and it's been kind of that moment where I came home, and I was in a rough life with uh, my ex-wife and I. We were in a rough spot, and I said, I need this specific thing to keep me grounded in the world and to keep me sane. Because I do cyber stuff a lot, so I'm looking mostly at zeros and ones, and I had
Yeah.
no way to get a creative avenue.
Right.
And
Right.
then I found Dungeons and Dragons again, and it's been nonstop ever since. So
My father-in-law, he was a trauma expert, and he was actually going to be put in charge of the initiative to provide social services for victims of war in Iraq after that whole thing. But then he got cancer. He worked for the White House for a while, but he was a psychiatrist, and he also engaged in psychotherapy. So he was really knowledgeable about both like kids to adults, a lot of victims of war, and he would tell us. Sometimes in front of you, you have 3 or 4 options, and all the options suck. You just have to pick the one that works best for you. And the thing is, you don't know what's going to happen until you try. So there are 2 things. Number 1 is you don't know what's going to happen until you try. So stop being afraid. And then number 2 is don't constantly rely on other people. So you took a chance.
Yep.
You tried it. You realize at this moment I have to do it by myself. You did exactly. You followed his instructions. I mean that's why you're here and you're successful at this.
Yeah.
Like it's amazing. I love the mind. That's why I like academics. I like hearing explanations for things.
Right.
And I always tell my students, hey, 30 years from now, this could all be wrong. Who knows?
I say anything I say on this show is my own thoughts and opinions.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Maybe the world is flat. I don't know. You get these like these theories of holographic projections from that white light we call heaven and God, and the universe is a rectangular flat piece. So maybe it is flat. I mean, who knows? But it's just good to talk about it. Keep it in your mind. If we don't agree with something, just kind of keep it up there for the future, and maybe you'll pick at it and you'll get your own ideology. But so I think was there a third question, or did you
so
ask?
The third question I ask is if you have, which I'm guessing you have because of the picture you have up there, when did you decide to pick up the mantle and why? So that's stepping away from being a player and turning into a game master.
Oh yeah. I love this question because I was so scared looking at the dungeon, the DMG for AD&D with all those charts. Like there are a lot of charts.
There's a lot of charts in the old days.
Yeah, even at Ernie's table, like he grabbed the chart and was looking at the charts and everything. He knew where to go for the charts. That's impressive alone, because you have to know where the charts are. And even his dad said, he mentioned like there are too many charts. There are too many levels. Like Pathfinder, I think it was 2.5 got like that. There's so many levels. It's cool. Mm-hmm. It's fun if you understand the levels and the manipulation, you're good at the math, but it scared me. So I ended up deciding, I DM'd when I was younger, but who knows how I was probably, but it wasn't really until Stranger Things came out and I really got back into it with my daughter one-on-one, and I realized, wait a second, one-on-one DMing is great, and you have this safe space, and even though you make a mistake, the other people probably don't know, and if they do, like I had a lot of professionals at my table. I had like engineers, executives, archaeologists, a lot of lawyers. One of the attorneys, real quick, like learn the rules over. I think he read the player's handbook in like 3 hours, and then he just knew all the rules. And attorney for a long time. And then when I would make a mistake, because I can't remember everything, even playing for decades, I can't remember everything. And then the new editions, whatever. And then he would comment on something, but he would do it and make the flow go. So it was really comfortable. And I realized, wait a second. So I did with my daughter one-on-one. The game, I was a DM, and then I started going to like Games Plus, Grognard Games, and started running games there, one shots, then campaigns there, and then I got like people from one shots. I brought them into my living room, people I knew that could regularly come, because the biggest problem is scheduling.
Oh yeah, biggest bad guy you'll ever meet is the scheduler.
Yeah, it's like things happen, and people get married, people work schedules. I had two attorneys that had to study for the bar, so they couldn't finish the campaign right at the end. But I mean, that's the way that works. And then so I know guys at half price books and like Skokie. I ran into a guy in Illinois, and he was saying how, oh, I had this campaign with the same guys from high school for the last 24 years, and that was like 6 years ago. How do you do that? And I want to be face to face. I don't want to be online. So,
Right.
but I ended up doing that, and was in my living room, and then I was going to Lake Geneva. There are You need to be comfortable with the people at your table.
Right.
So if you're a rules lawyer, you got to play with people who want to be with a rules lawyer, and they're rules lawyers as well. And that could be fun because you can have all these rules and try to manipulate the rules and get around them. That's a blast, problem solving at its best. But if, like me, I'm the flexible DM. My signature, I'm
Moniker, what's your
yeah, Robert, the Friendly Neighborhood Dungeon Master, from Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. I got it from there.
Yeah.
Because I like to be friendly at the game. If there's something that happens, I like to ease through it. And, everybody's happy at my table pretty much, unless something extreme happens, whatever. That's why I usually have 1 hour sessions beforehand, meetings before, get everybody to the coffee shop. If they say, no, no, we can talk for no, we're having a 45-minute to 1 hour meeting. I have an agenda with bullet points. What do you expect in the campaign? You have to do that. Because if you don't, you're going to get one person. They're not, there's nothing wrong with them. They just do things differently. And you're not at the same table. It's like me coming here and us not talking, and then you mentioning something and me saying, well, I don't want to do that. And then there's a conflict. So that's why you talk beforehand. You say, hey, this is what the show's about. This is what we do. How do you feel? And I'm like, yeah, this is great. This is a match for me. So I ended up I'm the guy now who I DM mainly at special events, usually in Lake Geneva. And what I do is, because 5e is known by the people around mostly, I'll take the general 5e rules, but I'll give it like an old school feel, characteristics. Okay. I'll use a mat. I'll use green army men, red for the monsters. I'll have like one on the mat. I'll use markers, but I'll have one like signature building.
Okay.
And then other than that, it's all in your mind. So you have to imagine everything, and I'm going to talk about this later.
It's the exact opposite of Stefan over there.
Yeah. Stefan's wow, like wow, like Dwarven Forge and stuff. Like, I know it's worth the money because it costs a lot to make it, even in molds and stuff. I'm an educator. I could never afford that stuff. So
I just pulled out a small loan on the next one, so I it's gonna hurt.
You have to get something. If you're going to buy something, little props and stuff, there's got to be something that you're going to reuse.
Yeah.
So I have my little green army men, and I have all the AD&D and some OD&D characteristics. So that way, when people play the game, when they're at my table, they got their 5e rules, their general rules. I tweak a few things. Like I have a level 0. You have one more roll for hit points because I think there are too few hit points, but there's too much money given up front, so I assign like 99 gold pieces, 99 to 100 ends up being perfect. And they have to make their weapons at first at level 0, and they go to level 1. So they end up getting an experience of what it's like to be playing Dungeons and Dragons when it first started, for the most part. But it's like a friendly game, and yeah.
No, I'm going to ask because I heard something and I think I caught it out of the top of my head, and I don't know if I caught it exactly. They have to make their weapons?
Oh yeah, they start in a shire, and they have regular farming clothes. They got to make their weapons. And like I remember one player, one of my attorneys was upset because she wanted to go and she wanted her paladin to get the sword. So I made that happen. Like every session it would up a level for like 3 sessions, and then it would take longer and longer. They have to make their weapons, so they have farming tools, but they have to make them, and then they have to they have to earn their character.
I love that.
I there's in 5e, I actually think 5e is really doable for me. I just think there's too much gold. They get way too much strong armor too quickly, and actually there aren't enough hit points. They get one more roll because wow, can you die 7 hit points? Like you're dead. And I started them at level 0, and that's pretty much all I do. Other than that, it's pretty much the same game as 5e and AD&D. I don't use the same charts and stuff like that. So and I'll make up something on the spot. Like I was playing with these rules lawyers once, and this was Pathfinder. Hi guys, if you're out there, awesome game, great to play, but it wasn't really my style. And when I got burned out, 2 points. Like one was when my character died, and I walked around the game store for 4.5 hours waiting for him to come back to life. I'm like, okay, I'm a real life person in this game. Figure out how to get my character back to life in 30 minutes. I'm at 4.5 hours. That was number one. Number two is so there's some stuff like verisimilitude, a term I got from Matt Colville, the appearance of it being like real, but it's a game, so it can be real to an extent. Right. So that was one thing. Second thing is I was starting to get bored in the game, and I started to shake people up as a paladin. And I was like, hey, let's go into the bar and let's find out, what do you know about the evil, whatever it was. Right. And then my buddy next to me, the ranger, was like, I'm going to try to pin him to the wall with an arrow. I'm going to shoot him with an arrow. How do I do this? I timed it, 7.5 minutes trying to figure out how to roll that up to see how they can shoot the arrow and pin me. I'm like, guys, roll the dice. If it hits double digits, you did it. That's what I do in my game. I don't play around. Double digits in my games means you were able to do it to some extent. Single digits, probably not. A 20, a nat 20 is like double damage or something, but this is what I do. Talk about verisimilitude. When they roll a 1, they hurt themselves. It may be 1 hit point, 2 hit points. The arrow breaks. They hit their hand. Roll a d4. Divide it by 2. If it's a 1, it's a 1. Right. If it's a 2, it's a 1. So it can get out of hand. But anyway, so I'm the guy who plays that game. I bring the old school, the cool parts of the old school environment back into 5e. I like and it's a neat experience. I like it. I love doing it. I introduce the game. That way people can leave my game and say, yeah, I played 5e, but it was like we had Green Army men. It was like when it was first created. Like, more like AD&D.
Yeah, that's nice. And like I said, for somebody who didn't get the opportunity to play AD&D in 2nd edition and 1st edition, my goal this year going into 2025 is to find those tables that is something that people are playing. Yeah. Because I want to have that feel. Partially because of growing up now in Dungeons & Dragons as long as I have. It's weird to say that, yes, I've been growing up in Dungeons & Dragons since 3rd edition, and I've been GMing now almost 20 years, but still to not know how it became, like, I feel like I'm missing a piece. Like, maybe there's something else I can gather from this. And
there's
I'm
like...
really looking forward to it.
Let's see, the dwarf was a monster. Technically, the elf was a monster, like in AD&D. So you know what I do is I railroad them. They can never have like natural night vision, because then you have to use torches. Then you can't dungeon crawl. It just spoils it for everyone.
Right? Yeah. If you're in the mood of dungeon crawl, you have to have that opportunity.
Yeah, and you can't fly. You can't fly unless it's just temporary. And then I make all my characters. And this is when a few of the viewers are gonna be like, Robert, what are you doing? I make them play human, intentionally, 100% human. And here's why: you can play different characters. I get it. That's perfectly fine, because they themselves, as Homo sapiens sapien, are humans. Right. And they're coming to the game. I want them to connect with this character so well, and then they get to develop the character the way they want. It's something I do for one shots. If it's for a campaign, then it's different. They can be elf or
a little more open,
No orcs though, because it's a great concept. You can do that. A PC can be an orc, but for me, it's still a monster.
Yeah,
it's different. I don't bash the people who make their PCs into orcs. I think it's a great idea. It's just not the way I play.
Right.
That's fine. We can be different, and that's fine. So you got to pick the table that you're comfortable with playing at.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love the conversations we're having. Sadly, it dives us down rabbit holes that is running time through quickly.
Yeah. Deviation. Yeah.
What
Right.
I
Right.
want to do though is now that we've went through the three questions, let's get into the grit of why you're here.
Okay.
Language. So what is the stem to languages like Elvish, like Klingon? How do those things even become something when there's really no way of speaking it or writing it in a real setting?
Okay. So here's the thing, and I actually pulled this for you guys. Tolkien talked about how it's what he does creating languages. He created about 15 of them, so, and some dialects. It is not a hobby in the sense of something quite different from one's work taken up as a relief outlet. The invention of languages is the foundation. The stories were made rather to provide a world for the language than the reverse. So according to Tolkien, and that's a quote, okay? According to Tolkien, he created a language and then built a world around him. Now this is where the linguist comes in, okay? Because there's so many different specializations in linguistics, and mine is very comprehensive. He specialized in language building, which there really isn't a term in linguistics for this because we don't build languages. Languages naturally change over time.
Right.
So he did something that's very unique. So then he talks about like his language Kudzul. I know I'm probably butchering that, but it was designed to resemble a Semitic language with a system of triconsonantal roots and other parallels, especially to Hebrew, just as some resembles between the dwarves and the Jews are intentional, he says. So like consonant clusters. So what he's saying here is this language, Kudzul, actually came partially from other language systems, such as Semitic languages and Hebrew.
Right.
So he just contradicted himself. Then, okay, and you can pull this up. He gave Sindarin, the language, a linguistic character, very, very like, though not identical with British Welsh, because British Welsh, tongue twister, because it seems to fit the rather Celtic type of legends and stories told of its speakers. So right there, Tolkien he created the language Sindarin
based off the stories he was telling.
The stories that were told in Celtic times. So what I'm telling you, and don't be surprised by this, I love Tolkien, he's a great writer. He didn't build the language from scratch and the stories came later. The stories came first. And so here's what's going on. There are something called language universals. So like all languages have nouns and verbs, consonants and vowels, basic word order, subject, verb, agreement. You can negate there's honorific forms in language. So anytime somebody comes up to you, look, I ran ESL programs for like 20 years. So I was like pro helping the immigrants learn language. My wife is an immigrant, okay? So I lived, you get it right. So I'm not a mean guy or whatever. But we would teach them U.S. cultural variables. So we would teach them, like, when you ask for something, even though you can barely speak the language, where is the bathroom? We always put the honorific form. Excuse me, where's the bathroom, please? Please, every language has it. Every language has it. So when someone comes up to you and makes a demand and it's not an emergency, you got to think like, why aren't they putting the honorific form on there? Like their language has it. Every language has it. So it's this idea of, and this is important. This is like social linguistic conversation. This is really important. So you have language universals. Tolkien knew that. So when he created the language, you looked at his own language, you looked at languages before. He created his languages based off of his background knowledge, which came from other languages, stories he read, books he read. He didn't build languages from scratch. That's completely inaccurate. So let's see here. How I can go through this with look at my notes here. So Tolkien himself was kind of obsessed with the interactive relationship between like languages and stories. and the latter, it was a manifesting effect from the former. So basically, he heard stories, he heard, he saw languages that were written, he read books, he read history. He was a literary. He read a lot. He knew C.S. Lewis. They can have conversations. He was very well read. Went to Oxford. Oxford University, like these, it's not Oxbridge anymore, it's Stocksbridge. These are a university above par of our Ivy League schools here. You have to have a tremendous amount of background knowledge to go to like St. Andrews, Oxford, Cambridge. Oxford is known for you having to already have to know the background and the foundation and have a strong background in whatever you're going to major in before you get there. And in these schools in the UK, the major starts on day one. You may have some electives, but there are no gen eds. Like You go in, my kid's over there for 4 years, England is 3 years. She's majoring in art history, film, and literature. Literature is like a sort of like a third major, like a minor. And since day one. So it's not a 4-year, 3-year degree over there. It's not. It's like they actually call them masters. So this guy was really well read. So he had background knowledge and a lot. He read a lot. So when he built languages, don't let these statements fool you. I understand that he did create stories from languages, but he built the languages from stories
and moved letters and things like that to make it sound like a completely different language. But we're stating now that he's more of utilizing the background stories and literature that he already had behind him to craft something unique and different.
Yeah, and actually the proof is here. Intro to linguistics courses, you'll hear this, you'll play this little game called What Came First, Language, Culture, or Thought? So James, go for it. This is a safe space. You can say whatever you want. What came first, language, culture, or thought?
Think thought would have first.
I mean, that makes sense. Anything you're going to say makes sense.
Right,
so
right.
Yeah.
I mean,
because you think something
first,
produce a language and it forms into a culture. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and I believe you could also flip that too. You could think something, it forms into a culture, and then language is spun from the culture.
Yeah, and so for our viewers, what James is getting to, and the next thing James is going to say is, you can flip it again, and then how many variations. Yeah, it's all done at the same time. It's all interactive. So language is the most intense part of culture. Religion is, most controversial. Language is a part of culture, but it's really intense. So we kind of separate it, even though it's part of culture. You have your ideologies, and then they manifest as behavior. So ideologies, a part of that is language within your ideological paradigm, your thoughts. So language, culture, and thought, it all happens at the same time. So as a human being, as Homo sapiens sapien here on planet Earth, to be humanity, when you have input coming in, right, through your senses, listening, speaking, you can smell something, taste it, you can see it, hear it, you can touch it, and then you have consciousness. That's another box to open up. Because I'll say something right now, keep in the back of your minds and remember this. I've said this before, and it's been proven only in my lifetime with other things. Human beings were never meant to verbalize their language, use language by this mechanism we call a voice box, and use your mouth to produce verbal language. Our mouths are meant for chewing, swallowing, and as a secondary breathing apparatus. Human beings initially think in images. We were meant to use consciousness to transfer consciousness on frequencies in order to communicate. You call that telepathy. My proof is this. Okay, first of all, I'm a linguist. I'm a professor in linguistics decades. I know the psycholinguistics behind this. Okay, we were never meant to do this. This is something we created. The proof is in this. Number one, we think initially in images. That's a fact. Right now, there are subliminally like millions of images going through our minds while we're attaching these language strands to the images. It's something that we created. That's number one. The second piece of proof is two identical twins, completely opposite parts of the world, have the same thought at the same time because they carry the same frequency of consciousness. This is going to be very confusing for you. It's going to even seem like esoteric. It's going to seem crazy. You can disagree. That's perfectly fine. But I'm telling you, as an academic in this area, keep it in the back of your mind. Eventually, you're going to see, maybe in your lifetime, maybe a few generations from now, that's what we were meant to do. And the problem why few people can, why only like twins do, because they share the same frequency of consciousness, is because our consciousness isn't yet developed enough. There are two things that can hold consciousness. One is large masses, like the planet has its own consciousness, and the second thing is humans with the cognitive tools to be able to manipulate it. That's why you don't see this happening in animals. There's sonar and bats and different things, but we're talking about consciousness. So we will eventually, we'll be able to use it. So language, culture, and thought interacts. So Tolkien already had this in his background knowledge. Now the question is, Tolkien said he constructed language first, and then the world's based on them. But what he didn't know, that he constructed his language based on his background knowledge, his culture and his thoughts simultaneously. And the neat thing is, like, and this is where we have similarities but also differences. What background knowledge did he have to create that, to create the books? What background knowledge does James have to create, his products? We all have slightly different background knowledge. James, you and I can watch a baseball game, and we can look at the audience, we can look at the general atmosphere, and we write a little one-page description of, afterwards, what our thoughts are about the general atmosphere. Well, there will be some similarities, but there will be differences, because regardless, we have different background knowledge.
Right.
So,
and you're going to pick out things that I wouldn't pick out because of that background knowledge. And because
this is so cool. This is why constructivism, Vygotsky, Piaget, this is why when I teach, I give my students like 2 or 3 instructions and I let them run with it. Because how am I going to say, no, that's wrong, you built it the wrong way? Because they're using their background knowledge. When you limit someone, when you lecture and then say, there's a quiz and here's the quiz, and there's no interaction back and forth, and you don't let the student to grow on their background knowledge, you don't let the DM take the player's interests. Because I always ask them, what do you want in the game as a player? What do you want your PC to do? What are their goals? And I integrate that into a game, but I make sure that the campaign I create, there's certain things that are on rails, there's certain things I railroad them with, certain things on rails, but for the most part it's open world-ish. And then my game I create, so the game you create from a linguistic perspective and story building perspective, it should be a story template that becomes an adventure. And the best thing you can do is listen to your players during the game, and this is when I became a way better dungeon master, and improvise on the spot and change your story based on what they say during the game, even though it contradicts. Like, you have them rescuing the princess and they're like, no, we want to I don't know, do something else and kill the princess or do something else, and you're like, no, you're like, oh, inside you're just like, you're going nuts, because it's like destroying your book. You're not writing a book, it's a story template. When you do that, that is the greatest thing that ever happened to me in a game. When I listened to my players, I listened to their language, and I changed the story template so their adventure changed and went on a different path, and I improvised it. And that was like the greatest thing in the world that I did. So listen to your stories, listen to your meet with your players, and ask them about what their background knowledge is. What do you want from the game? What do you want your PCs? Have a list of things.
Yeah, I will say this is interesting. We're talking about it this way because of the time frame of what's happening right now. So about 2.5 weeks ago, well, it's been a month since I've had the book, but I started really diving into the Game Master's book of proactive roleplay, and I have been on and on just looking at it and reading it and trying to get understanding of it and asking questions like, what is the character's goal? Where are we directing this thing? What are your plans in it, long term and short term? And surprisingly enough, most of it builds itself. Like, I don't have to then struggle to figure out where the next step they're heading, because they're already giving me it without me thinking about it. And for me personally, it has become a new way of thinking about it, And then to add more background to this, I've been working with an organization down in Norfolk, Virginia, which is a comedy theater who does nothing but improv
Yeah.
and utilizing some of their skills to become a better game master. And we're getting ready to, and they do their own D&D night where they do everything as improv. So a game master gives it a skeleton, but the monsters are improv, the NPCs are improv, and the players are improv, and the NPCs and the monsters are only given, like you said, 3 or 4 points. Like, hey, the rest is up to you. Now, I will tell you, you think you can have a hard time dungeon mastering for 4 players. Try dungeon mastering for 4 players, 6 monsters, and 6 NPCs. See what happens. Sean is a unique individual that is very skilled at his job. I will tell you.
If you want to drastically improve your gaming, and this is gonna touch everything, and this is the whole point of I think this is one of the main points of Blake Blake's 50 Years of Fantasy, is how the bigger story of where it all comes from, how it positively influences people in the community. Take an improv class, because what's going to happen is, that's the problem I was engaged in. I wasn't improvising, and I was railroading. And I understand a one shot you railroad. Like when I go to Lake Geneva and I have a one shot, I sort of railroad.
Choice. You got 3 hours, and you got to get from here to here.
Yeah, we got 3 hours, and it's like 3 hours is nothing. I need at least like 6.5, 7 hours, and it's like with like 2-3 environments. But take an improv class. And so what happens is this: it's like it's interesting because it's the same concept I teach in my courses, integrating diversity into the curriculum, where like I teach about like where racism comes from. It can come from either you observe it, it's taught to you, or number 2 is you develop bad stereotypes because you're in a situation that's different from what you're usually used to, and there's no guidance through it. Now, the great thing about gaming is that it's real life. You're in front of other players, but it's safe. You can make mistakes in the game, and you're not actually going to walk away dead or hurt or anything. If somebody ever gets into a fight, an actual physical fight, players at a game table, like you got like players that shouldn't be there. So
I did that in high school. I got my first chair thrown at me, and my first set of dice thrown at me in high school. But
that's an extreme, and it's like, so at the gaming table, this is a great safe space, an actual safe space. You can make mistakes, and you apologize or whatever, but it's this idea of learn how to improvise, because what happens is when you improvise and you make a mistake, you're going to make tons of mistakes. We still make mistakes nowadays. When I lecture, I do, etc. You learn from them, and you learn how to not feel bad. I can actually make a mistake right now. You can call me out in front of everybody, and I won't feel that horrible feeling in my chest, that like nervousness. I won't feel anything. I'll look at you and I'll say, and I'll try to see your point of view, and I'll find some truth in your point of view. The only time it doesn't happen is when it's like super extreme point of view. It rarely ever happens. So take an improv class and learn how to listen to your players, listen to their language. Because remember, like when I prep for a game, or when the players are at the table, they're making decisions based on their background knowledge, which comes from books, movies, stories, friends, experiences, their interests. Here's something that I learned at my table, and I saw it in action for the first time at Ernie Gygax's table. Something he does so well, because he's a great orator. He's a great narrator. He's got this great presence, this loud, carrying voice. What I learned from Ernie is that you got to slow down. Slow down. We will be at his table. We'll be playing for like 10 hours. We'll be at his table. All of our PCs will be within like a 10-foot area, barely moving, for 2.5 hours. And you don't even realize it. It's really fun because he will describe areas. He slows down the pace. He slows down his language. He'll describe what is happening in the language, carries his voice, be emphatic, Use a lot of adjectives. Adjectives. In English, adjectives is the secret. You'll see. I mean, read all the great pieces of literature. In Japanese, it's verbs. Okay. In English, it's adjectives. It's like learn an adjective every day. And the reason why is because we have the largest lexicon. It's 500,000, 1 million words because our language consists of so many other languages. So we have such a huge lexical base. So, and he'll describe what's going on very slowly and he'll think about what the player's doing, and his reply back or his comment back, the effect of whatever's happening will be based on that PC's interest. So he'll improvise right there on the spot and remember, oh, that player, he does it so naturally. It's like freaky. It's so natural. And so if your character, comes across a monster and you have, holy water or something, and you're like a cleric, and then, you can improvise as a DM and say like, make the monster evil, the monster's gonna be evil, but make the monster have something that allows you to use that, holy water, like improvise right on the spot. Slow down your language, be very descriptive, and remember the player's background. I have a cheat sheet where I have the player's name, right? So I'll have like James, and I'll have the PC's name, and then like their favorite weapon and their goal. And I'll sit there and I'll remember that. I'll keep looking over it, and then you pace yourself. So what you do is you immerse yourself in the environment you're in. So if you're really good at what you do, I mean, this is my opinion, the way I like to play the game. But if you really want to do a good job, and I'll explain why it can be universal, slow yourself down and immerse yourself in what's happening in that moment, and don't rush them through everything. And when you do that, when you slow yourself down, use a loud, caring voice, you're very descriptive, using a lot of adjectives. What you're doing is you're building that mental image in your players' minds. And remember, humans initially think in images. Right. You can't erase that. And they use their background knowledge. Any information that comes in, those synaptic charges are bouncing around their intelligences, and they're using the images. The image is interacting with their background knowledge, and it'll be amazing just by slowing yourself down.
Yeah, we have the luxury on Monday nights. We have a player who doodles very quickly. Like, I've never seen somebody doodle in the speed that this man does. Chris is an absolutely incredible individual, and he'll, by our halftime show, or by the halftime when we break, he'll have at least 1 or 2 doodles done of a moment during the show already. And
I love it. I had a few. My daughter does that too. I love, and they show you. You're like, whoa.
Yeah. So we show them on the screen right as we're going, and it's neat though, because it has not only been good to see how the descriptions were shown, but it's one thing I've gotten used to with him is it's a way for me to know what's catching his attention, because he's the one that's drawing it. So it's given me goals to be like, okay, if I do things like this, it's catching his attention. He's getting excited about it.
Yeah, images are so powerful. My father-in-law, when he engaged in psychotherapy, he would ask his patient when he would say, when he would try to explain a concept and wanted them to give him homework to practice something at home, regarding behavior, interpretation of behavior, he would ask, hey, have you ever seen that one movie with like Tom Cruise or whatever? No. How about that one with like Brad Pitt or whatever? Oh yeah, I saw that movie. Do you remember that scene when Brad Pitt did this and that? Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. He was like, yeah, I want you to do that. Do you remember the emotion on his face? Do you remember how he was like strong? And so he used scenes from movies, because visually we use, out of all the senses, definitely not consciousness because we're not developed yet, but out of all of our senses, we have more sensory receptors active in our visual senses. I think they're called opioid receptors, I can't remember, but okay. You have as many as 10 million active in any given moment. And that's another theory I have about why we judge. It's not just based on our background knowledge, but we're using our senses. So we judge visually with things. And and it gets into like race and everything. It's like, because if you close your eyes and you start talking to someone, you don't know what the race they are, you don't know what they look like, and it's like
Right.
you start to interpret them as a completely different person, right? I mean, you can.
Right. And you can. I
Um,
mean, a lot of times,
that's
like
why
I
the
will.
dungeon master was behind the screen, because
Mm,
they didn't want the players to even see what the DM looked like. Sorry, you were gonna say.
no, that's interesting because we have an individual in our dojang, and she's blind and she's trying to learn martial arts, and it's interesting to watch how we will watch a instructor teach things, but she has to be literally walked through each step tactically or tactile. No,
Tactically, you're
yeah,
right.
okay.
Oh,
Um, where
oh, you
so
mean
that she can do it.
tactilely? Oh, you mean like physically tactile?
Yeah,
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
Huh?
her, yeah, because she has to be shown every little motion. It's not just the motion itself, but she has to literally feel
Uh-huh.
with another hand to move it that way in order to catch it because she doesn't have that sense of eyesight. Um, and
Yeah,
that's
that's how
another
she knows what's
thing.
going on. She's producing images up here, and
Right.
they're probably. I mean, I don't know what color or if they're on the
Right. I mean,
grayscale or
luckily
whatever.
she has had
Yeah.
like she didn't go blind until in her 30s. So
Oh,
she
oh,
has
okay.
an imagery built for years and years.
That's
Um,
helpful.
but yeah, she's now halfway through the program. I mean, and but it's impressive to watch how they have to change the way they teach her because of that impairment. Um,
Yeah, there's that guy I forgot. This goes back to like late '80s, early '90s. He's uh he's blind. Oh, and by the way, the blind community, deaf community is blind and deaf. It's not completely visually impaired, completely
right.
auditorily. My daughter's friends are deaf, and
Yeah.
they actually say it's deaf and blind. Those are the proper terms.
Right.
I just wanted to mention that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion and about sensitivity and stuff, but those are the proper terms. So yeah, and this guy's blind. He's completely blind, and he learns how to use a sword, and he like fights incredibly. Of course, it's LA, it's
Yeah.
Hollywood. So I bet that student is going to develop some incredible skills based on not being able to see,
Hmm.
being
Yeah.
blind. That's
It's
that's
crazy.
incredible.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, and man, I could talk about this forever. But we're running out
Yeah.
of time. That's the sad
Yeah. Of
part.
course. Of
We only have
course.
10 minutes left.
My
This is the
apologies.
point where the audience, if there's anybody still around that has questions, we're going to answer the one question that came out really early in the show though, before we leave.
Okay, and then I
Um,
have homework for everybody later.
all right, we got to close
Yeah,
down at
two
we
things.
got to close
So give
the
me 1 minute
tavern
at
down
a
at
time. Yeah,
10:30. So
good, good.
we got to go quick. But the one question Heroes of Evermore had, and Heroes of Evermore is a huge supporter here at the tavern,
Yeah.
is how is it like playing in an OG Gary Gygax table?
Yeah, there's a lot of information floating out around there about, other stereotypes out there. You know, when I played at Ernie's AD&D table, it was AD&D, so it wasn't OD&D.
Mm-hmm.
Original D&D is really limited in like the characters and the races, the species and everything. So AD&D has more, so I like AD&D. But no, it was just like a blast. It was a blast. It was neat not just being there in front of the son of the guy who created it. And I like to think of Ernie as the guy who took his father's work and then kept going on with it. You know, I'm a very at the tables, everything's lovely. I mean, we have great interaction. It's incredible being there. He's very welcoming. It's a very welcoming atmosphere. Look, I'm in my 50s. So I integrate OD&D. We have great time at my tables. We have all different types of people and personalities and identities of people, genders, you name it, at the table. We're there to play a game.
Mm.
When you're at my table, I'm calling you by your PC's name.
Yeah.
I can't remember your real name because I'm calling you by your PC's name because I promote verisimilitude. It's really neat because it's really neat at like playing not original but traditional as AD&D because there's more to it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, because it brings that nostalgia from my childhood. But once again, I had great times playing the game. and I'm I promote ethical play, and we never even use like the word blood, or I think we just say I want to kill the monster. The most harmful thing we ever say is the word kill. I mean, so
Right.
it's a lot of fun. It's something, definitely try it. Try it at my table. Try play at AD&D. Bring a group. Yeah, it's really an experience. The thing is, for me, it's nostalgia
Hmm.
because I grew up with that. So I miss Randy and Ken and playing. So, but I also like the basic part of it. I like, I like making everybody human so that way they can connect with themselves, and it's real basic. They can't fly, they can't see in the dark, so they have to problem solve. I love it. Like I got this from Matt Colville where we're like, let them forget to buy a 6-foot pole. Let them forget to buy 50 feet of rope and see what happens. And they fall in a trap or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, AD&D will teach you to focus on those real basic elements that sometimes 5e you get too fancy in 5e with different things, and AD&D is more like basic problem solving.
Yeah, I do know because
Yeah.
I had the conversation with Luke last year at Genghis Khan when we were out there in Colorado, and that was the one thing he had told us about a lot is like all those little things that you got at the general store, they had purpose back then. We
Yep.
kind of ignored it now, like it's not as big of
Yep.
a deal anymore. But
Yep.
there was a reason you had a rod. There was a reason you used ball bearings. There were reasons for these. Um,
MacGyver.
yeah,
I mean, if you Google MacGyver, that show is neat. He used like something in his pocket to break himself out of a room he was locked into.
yeah,
That's what a real thief does. But no, but if you that's the thing. That's the thing. Forget about my age or whatever. If you like playing all the, creatures that are half orc and half elf and all this kind
yeah,
of interesting stuff, do it. It's a blast. You're being creative. I
right,
like to be creative in a way where I give you almost nothing and you have to build it from scratch.
yeah.
It's just a different type of playing. Try it once.
No, I will.
I
Yeah.
played the other way. I played the other way. It's a blast. I played 5e with people, and my daughter plays characters that fly all the time. So I would put like a cover. There's like what I would do to her. She'd be in a forest, and there would be no wind, but I would say the canopy is moving around.
Yeah.
It's all bats. And so when
Oh,
she flies up there, it teaches her to think twice. Like if you're gonna fly, you better pay attention to what's up
right.
there.
Yep.
So, anyways,
No, I love that. And like I said, and it gives people reasons to think through things. You're not just diving into a puzzle. You're actually
yeah,
trying to work through it.
it's
Um,
different. Both types of play are awesome.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
every
Robert, I've absolutely loved our conversations between the ideas of language and how Dungeons and Dragons has manipulated or changed over the years, and how you've been able to not only change it but utilize both versions at the same time, which I think is a really cool concept that even I haven't thought of yet. Maybe it'll happen in the future. We'll see what happens. But any last things you'd like to say here
yeah,
at the tavern?
yeah. Three quick things. Number one is it's a safe space, so please try to join a table that's very different from the style you normally play. Like if you like playing 5e, join AD&D just for one table. It's very rare to come across a table where whatever they're using language you don't want or whatever. I
Mm-hmm.
always say just like, we speak properly here. Every once in a while the F-bomb is dropped in the funniest moment, in the funniest of all moments, and everybody's laughing, whatever. So try to play at a table that's very different from yours, and
Right.
it'll give you perspective. It'll build on your background knowledge, and it'll let you be more creative. And you'll see what I'm talking about. Why I play I play in 5e and completely 5e. I've done that many times, many campaigns, and I also play like a little bit old school. Other than that, that's homework number one. Homework number two: go to every university has its specialization. Go to Purdue University. It's Purdue Owl, and I use it in we use it in homeschooling our daughters. They have a great online system where they show literary tools, and go through those literary tools and see how they're defined, like foreshadowing, etc. Different types of characters. It'll explain what each what conditions are in the game, what each person, what their personalities could represent. It helps you build stories. Hence, that's why people tend to be very intelligent the more they read, because they understand this more. And other than that, what I really would like you to do is I'd like you to take this idea, lastly, is this idea of language. Since Tolkien did, write The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, based on this story building, how it interacts with language, and language was a huge purpose in his writing of the book. So just read the book or watch the movie, even the cartoons or whatever, and watch them again or read them again, or even just one, and think about it through the lens of a linguist. Now you're a linguist and you're focusing on language, like what they say, like the different dialects. Why are there different dialects? The writings, why do they look like that? The tone, why it's being used, what the purpose is, why are there different languages? And think about it, because it'll bring different insight, and it'll be like watching the movie almost like for the first time, because now you know the purpose. The purpose was he built the story around basically the language and the folklore of his background knowledge, etc. But he built it around the language and everything that came with that. So now watch Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. I love The Hobbit. I love the first one, my favorite. And look at it through the lens of a linguist now, and ask yourself why. Why is the language being like this? Why do they talk like this? What's with the tone? What's with the lighting? What's with the scripture? There's a purpose behind it. And that and when you do that, when you self-reflect on that, you'll become a better game master, because you'll be able to incorporate those ideas into your game.
I love that. Thank you, Robert. I know it's getting late, but thank you for coming on and hanging out with us tonight. This has been a really wide eye-opener. I think one of the few people I've had the opportunity to come in with such a vast academic knowledge, which is amazing. It's broken down things that even I had not thought about, which is exciting.
We got some deep structure here, a lot of surface-based stuff, but I wish we had 5 hours. But
maybe we'll do another show. Maybe if somebody really wants it, like, I'm always open to breaking down and getting deeper into things like this with you.
Yeah.
And maybe
I would love to do that.
Maybe we'll gather a couple different people. We'll gather somebody who understands language, somebody who's a very descriptive game master, somebody who is writing very abstractly, and kind of put it all together to talk about what that would look like. Because it's a difference between, and I'm kind of thinking through this, is like how Tolkien saw things compared to how James Pratchett saw things. So you've got Discworld, which is very unique and fantastical, but it's also very whimsical and comedic almost. And then you've got Tolkien, which is very dramatic and dark and gritty and no magic, or very little magic. I won't say no, but very little. And what that construct looks like between the two.
You know what I would love to do without edition bashing, because there's no need, like you said, you just play the way you want to, and that's fine. I would love to get a 5e person and like an AD&D person, and that's kind of like me. I'm both, because I do both, and then I mix both. But to get them, someone who's solely 5e and solely AD&D, get them in, or even OD&D, and to talk about the advantages of playing in those systems, not edition bashing. And we would have a disclosure at the beginning. This isn't edition bashing. This is just to promote, because it promotes incredible ideas. That's why I mix them together. Go to Lake Geneva. They let me do this. They let me do this. Paul Stormberg lets me do
Robert,
this.
If you're going to be at GaryCon this year, I've already signed up. So I'll be there.
I hope to be.
At Lake Geneva in March. So
they let me. Paul Stormberg lets me do that. Lets me run 5e with an old school, because it's fun. It's creative. It brings people together. It's a good thing.
No.
And you're safe at my table. Everything's fluffy and cool.
No,
so
definitely.
You're good.
I love being at your table. I'd love to meet you and actually have a chance to sit down and talk more about this. Sadly, though, we're running out of time, and it's time to close the tavern.
My apologies.
This innkeeper's getting tired.
I don't have work tomorrow, so I'm lucky. So
no, I got to work in the morning. Anyway, thank you once again for coming on board here at the tavern for those that are watching, I hope you really got some information on this. This seems to be some seriously good information that would help you out in your next game, hopefully. Not only that, but gives ideas on how maybe you can add to your game. Keep an eye out. So, Tabletop Misfits, next week we have two potential opportunities. One, we have NPC Charles, who does a lot of the photography for Stefan over at Dwarven Forge and a lot of other things at the conventions. And we're going to talk about how images are working to help game masters.
Oh, wow.
Or
what a great next session.
Or we have a wonderful guest of mine who is a lovable and an absolutely cherished friend of mine who has just launched their next Kickstarter. And I really want to give a shout out to him. Team Drew's Basement has been working on this for over 2.5 years. And they have taken a game that had fallen into the depths of darkness and have raised it up in a role-playing setting. So if we don't hear anything from Charles, we're going to bring him on. That's who we're supporting right now tonight. Go check him out. Wazdeck is the name of it. It's a dungeon builder, community-based game, similar to Dungeons & Dragons, but it's got a little bit more of a board game-esque to it. And the minis are amazing. Go check out
more ideas.
So
more great ideas. Great opportunity for getting ideas.
Thanks a lot. He's been game mastering for 28 years, and we were talking about this at Mysticon as well. But if you want to see how I game master, that's on Monday nights over on Gen Con TV at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And of course, come find us here at the Tavern. If you want to find out anything more, watch on the or go check out any of the socials and hop into our Discord. Come hang out with us and chat. Ask all the questions you want, and we'll get a hold of these guests that we've had on the show and get the answers you're looking for. Until then, this is Last Call. Raise your glasses high. This is Tavern Talks. We'll see you guys all next week.
Thanks for having me.